What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another Pay-Per-Viewpoint, a double Pay-Per-Viewpoint post-show edition of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast. I don't know if we've done any of this before, where we've done two pay-per-views on the same one in this kind of fashion. So maybe it's the first time ever. I don't know. Who am I? If you don't know, I am Tony Mango, as you can see on your screen, or if you're listening to the audio-only side of things, then thank you for joining us on whatever platform it is that you are on. But if you are on YouTube, and you are live, for instance, then hit up the live chat. Also do the super chats. That way I know that, my attention gets diverted in the right direction there. That'll help it support us, as many other things can do. If you're listening after the fact on YouTube, though, make sure you also hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe, ring that notification bell in case you didn't know when we go live for these things. That's the best way to do it. You got a little email alert for that. And I will plug some other stuff later on, but most of you probably know by now how to support us best. A couple different ways for you to join Patreon and so on and so forth. I'll explain it a little bit later on. If you are listening to this on the audio-only platforms, though, another way that you can leave a comment on something, if you don't want to just go to smarkoutmoment.com or you want to leave a thing on Facebook or whatever it might be, is to hit up the Discord server. Now, I will plug that real quick because that is something that I tend to forget about if I don't say it at the beginning of this. But the whole setup with Discord that we've got, multiple different channels for multiple different things, pro wrestling and Smark Out Moment, is open 24/7, chat it up with everybody else, and keep the discussion going, whatever it might be. So let me just read a little bit of the chat, see who's on right now. I see we have Frankie and we have Ted E. Thank you for joining us. What's up, guys? I'll read what they say so far. What a night, 2 great shows. Goddamn, the main event at Double or Nothing might be the match of the year so far. I'm gonna kind of agree with that one. Anarchy in the Arena was so much fun. Moné and Hayter was great. Women's matches stole the show on Battleground. Stephanie's just on a different level. Ted E. That's rough. You got to cover both at the same time. Did you get help? And hit the like button, you cowards. Yes, you cowards. Hit the like button. No, didn't get any help. Well, I should put it this way. I didn't get any help in the sense of to do the coverage for them. And I was doing coverage for Smark Out Moment, Indie Wrestling News, and The Ring Report. So 3 bits of coverage for each one of those. And then, the 6 tabs that are open on there, then we have the multiple screens that I'm watching. And also Anarchy in the Arena, for instance, 4 screens of Anarchy in the Arena. And then on my other screen, it's still NXT Battleground. So 5 things where I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very much, tiresome way to cover this, but I did get help in the sense that I didn't have to do all the news reports over on EWN, and it's kind of, I get to pick and choose what I do on the Ring Report and stuff too. So slow news coverage on my part. If I was able to clone myself, then there would have been more posts put up, but at the same time, you can't cover everything all the time. So people over there at EWN, like Ryan and everybody, covering that. So my ideal scenario, I'd be covering this stuff more. If I had it my way, I would not do coverage for any one thing more than Smark Out Moment, of course, because it's my own baby. So then I would have, the title change alert stuff the way that I used to and everything. So it's not ideal. And, I make the best that I can. But it is exhausting watching these shows, multiple shows at the same time, especially after we just had Saturday night's main event. We just had the TNA Under Siege thing, and we just had the full week of pro wrestling. It's something like 30 hours of wrestling that I've watched, just watching wrestling this week, let alone the podcasts, the articles and stuff. So one of the things to go along with that is I do not want to watch wrestling tomorrow night. I don't want to watch Raw. I am tired of pro wrestling. I want to take a break from this. My only break from it this weekend, for the most part, was I saw Mission Impossible, which, not my favorite Mission Impossible movie, but it's at least a better way to end a series than No Time to Die was for James Bond. So, I recommend checking it. If you like Mission Impossible movies, you'll like the movie. I mean, they're all like the same basic level of good. So if you want more discussion on that, by the way, fanboysanonymous.com, you could always sponsor more stuff like that. So I also see we have Josh in the chat giving coverage tonight on everything was exhausting and it doesn't stop. We have Raw tomorrow. Exactly. It's just the wheels keep turning over and over and over again. And at least Raw is tomorrow instead of SmackDown, because SmackDown is just brutal to get through these days. And I know, but to me, I'm still just kind of like, I don't want to watch Raw tomorrow. I don't really want to watch NXT. I don't want to watch Dynamite. I definitely want to skip Evolve. I would like a week off of pro wrestling. And this isn't the last time this is going to happen this year. We've got multiple other times over what they've already announced. They could announce more too, that are going to be like Worlds Collide, for instance. You got Worlds Collide leading right into Money in the Bank. So that's going to be a full day of pro wrestling coverage for just WWE. And then we got, All In Texas is the same as Saturday night's main event, I think. And then Evolution is the night after. And so that's another like 2 events at the same time. And then the other thing. At least that's a little bit easier because Saturday night's main event will just be 2 hours in the middle of All In. But, the AEW shows go on forever. And that's why we're starting this as late as we are. Because this is a full, hour and a half or more after the Battleground pay-per-view ended. But it made more sense to do it this way. So that's where we're going to do it. So I'm going to bounce around back and forth between these two, which we haven't done before. But I invite everybody, of course, to leave your comments below. Tell us what you think. If you didn't check out both and you don't want to know what happens on both of them, then I apologize about doing the bounce and forth kind of thing. I just think that it makes a little bit more sense than for me to be like, let me run down all of Battleground and then run down all of Double or Nothing. So, yeah, we're trying something different. I don't know. So that means I'm going to be referring to this list off on the side quite a bit here and there. So as you would expect with this kind of pay-per-view setup, I didn't get the opportunity to really pay full attention to every single match that was happening. It's just kind of impossible to do. If I'm typing something while something's going on and something else is going on, I'm, all over the place. And that's not even including like eating dinner, which, by the way, it was a smash burger tonight and a chili cheese dog. And both of them were really good. So shout out to Smashed in NYC. The first thing that started off was, technically the first thing that started off was me loading up the buy-in an hour early because, as I mentioned before, some intern somewhere or whatever put the wrong time, so they had that at 5:30. But I had that in the background. But the buy-in itself, they took care of some matches before WWE started to get involved in any kind of matches, so I was able to watch those more. That was Anna Jay and Harley Cameron beat Megan Bayne and Penelope Ford in a tag team match in the women's division. Fine enough match. It's, it is what it is. Then there was a trios match. It was Bandito, AR Fox, and Hologram and Commander beating, who was it on here? Let me just double check again because I have my thing. It's a little bit off to the side. Beating Crew, Action Andretti and Leo Rush, and Rocky Romero and Trent Beretta, the RPG Vice. Didn't really see as much of that match. I was busy doing some other stuff, setting up some stuff for Battleground and all. So that I kind of don't really have anything to say just because it wasn't something I was really watching a whole lot. What I did see was fine. Again, they're just matches. And that's typically what I end up saying a lot in a lot of AEW shows. WWE shows too, but WWE shows tend to have a little bit more storyline overall. So I can kind of break that down and analyze that. But you can't really analyze move by move unless you're just going, I want to see stunt show. And sometimes I want to see that, sometimes I don't. When it comes to the matches that don't really matter and the matches that are just going to zap my energy more than anything else, like I know I didn't need to see this Bandito AR Fox whatever match. That was something that I chose to skip. And I don't think that anybody's going to tell me that I ended up missing the most, wonderful match of the year or anything. So in order of bouncing around, now, of course, there are crossovers. They start off the first match of the show at the same time, basically, from both things. But I'm going to go in order of like when the segments ended. There was the Women's North American Championship match for NXT on Battleground. Sol Ruca defeats Kelani Jordynne. Not surprising there. The only real surprise for me is that Zarya got involved in a way where Zarya got thrown out ringside. They did the typical thing where it's like, you're out of here. What? Oh my God. Oh man, I'm so upset and all this. Which of course I love saying that because it's always like so over the top and funny. So they're really pushing this idea of like Sol Ruca and Zarya like not quite being on the same page as far as Zarya trying to be like a little overprotective maybe and treating and being more on the heel side. I think more so even than I thought before, but I'm still going to echo my same opinion as I had before. I still feel like Ruca needs to lose the title to Zarya, and Zarya should be a heel in the process of doing that. But this sort of like seals the deal a little bit more for me that that's the direction that they should be going. So it shouldn't happen like immediately. I don't think that, this is May 26th technically right now. I don't think that like by June 1st she should have lost the title or something. But I do think that sometime before the end of the summer, Zarya should win that belt. And on the flip side of things, we started off with another women's match on Double or Nothing. That was Mercedes Moné against Jamie Hayter for the finals of the Women's Owen Hart Cup tournament. Good match, from what I could see. Again, I was focused a little bit more on Ruca a little bit, just because like my eyes gravitated a little bit more towards my TV, and I have Peacock up on my TV, and I have the AEW stream on my computer itself, and a bigger screen. And let's be honest, overall, I thought that was going to be a better match, so I was paying a little bit more attention to that. But both matches seemed like they were good, and there were a couple moments here and there where I was like, okay, they are going to go with Jamie Hayter, and Mercedes ends up getting like a roll-up win, and bolting to the stage. So it makes it seem like Jamie Hayter could have won that, which is done really well. Mercedes, though, now is going to face Toni Storm at All In. So maybe there is something else with the Athena thing. Maybe they do something with ROH Supercard of Honor, like Mercedes fights for that belt right after or right before. Maybe she's even going into All In with, the Owen Hart Cup tournament. It's weird to say. The Owen Hart Foundation Cup tournament championship belt. Doesn't make any sense. Maybe she's got that around her shoulders, and maybe she also ends up beating Athena and winning the ROH Women's World Championship and is just carrying every single belt and just, kind of doing that thing to replace the one that she just lost. She just lost the New Japan Strong Women's title. Or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's just the focus is on Storm and Moné. But I will come back to this in the future. Storm and Moné, unless you convince me otherwise, I'm assuming that Moné wins that championship. So good match for both to start off. Then there was a backstage segment on Battleground where two people from AAA were shown. Dallas, I'm assuming is how you pronounced her name. I didn't overhear what they were saying because a lot of the speaking things that happened tonight were just drowned out by the sound of another match happening. So while people are talking about Chick Tormenta and I'm assuming Dallas, it's like if they didn't put the graphics up on the screen, I wouldn't have really known what their names were because I don't know who they are. And people talking while, Mercedes is doing a drop kick or something. But they're shown backstage. They're shown again a little bit later on too. And there was also a backstage interview with Mike Santana from TNA, who was saying he's watching the World Championship match later on. He wants to fight the champion next and all that. And everybody from No Quarter Catch Crew, except for Myles Borne, who you can assume was just getting ready for his match with Femi. They all roll up. Charlie Dempsey is like, oh my God, another TNA guy trying to steal a spotlight. And Santana's like, fuck you, pal, basically. Tavion Heights is like, yo, dude, you're really cool. How about we have a match on Tuesday? And Ren Sinclair doesn't say anything. So Santana's going to have a match on TNA, or not on TNA, on NXT on Tuesday night against Tavion Heights. I'm assuming he wins. That's pretty cool. So the next thing was a 6-man tag. That was Josh Briggs and Hank Walker and Tank Ledger, or whatever names you want to give them on this when, I didn't do any typos this time around to be like, oh, I typed out Tank Lanker or Hank Wedgeman or something. But Hank Tank and Josh Briggs surprisingly beat the Culling. I don't know exactly why that happened because the only thing that I had justified was if the Culling wins this match, then that makes sense that they would get a tag title match coming out of it. So Brooks Jensen and Niko Vance don't have any ground to stand on now to be the next number one contenders. And it didn't even happen by product of the returning Yoshiki Inamura, who came out after the match. So I think that this was really weirdly done. I don't know where they're going within this. I don't know if it's just a matter of we wanted to have this moment for some reason. I don't know why Inamura is back after just leaving last week or so. I don't like it. It seems like this is kind of ass backwards for a lot of things. Inamura technically shouldn't be here And if he is, why is he here on this night? And then if he is showing up at this night, why is he showing up then instead of during the match? Why are the tag team champions beating potential challengers? Why is Briggs beating Shawn Spears? It's just, I don't think that this was the right setup. So didn't like that. Couldn't tell you really about the match itself. Although Hank and Tank are giving me vibes now of they're if you mixed Heavy Machinery with Public Enemy with the way that they're dressed and stuff. So that has that whole segment. Again, not my favorite thing. Backstage, there's a thing with Ava talking to Ethan Page, and she announces that the winner of the match between Ricky Saints and Ethan Page, which apparently is going to start the episode of TNA, or we wanted to call it TNA, the episode of NXT on Tuesday. Now it's a TNA crossover, and it's just, TNA is taking over NXT. That's going to start off the show on Tuesday, and the winner of that is going to then defend the North American Championship at Worlds Collide. They didn't say who is going to challenge for the belt, and I'm assuming that Ricky Saints is going to be going into that as the champion, but then again, that also depends on who would end up fighting. If it's a babyface, then that's a good chance that maybe Ethan Page does win, but I don't know. We'll see about that. This review is, quote, not my favorite thing, LOL JK. Yeah, for some things. I am going to praise some other stuff a little bit later on. So, Worlds Collide, not my favorite thing. Astro in the chat, I don't know much besides Trick Williams match result. I stayed off YouTube. Well, we're giving you the results down here. Speaking of the next results, that was FTR against Daniel Garcia and Nigel McGuinness. The only note that I wrote down about this was a botch, and it's a spot that I think was pretty funny the way that it ended up playing out. So, long story short, the way to break this down, and it's much easier for me to show it to you on camera for the the audio only people aren't going to get this visual, but you can watch the match. This, my left hand on the right hand side of your screen, wedding band hand, that's Dax Harwood. My head, let's treat that as Nigel McGuinness. And then on the other side of the ring, you've got Cash Wheeler. Now the plan is Cash is going to start going after Nigel. Dax is going to start going after Nigel. And they're both going to hit their forearms and crash into him. Now the plan is actually for the spot for Nigel to move out of the way so that those two collide into each other. However, Cash is going towards Nigel. And Nigel's facing Cash. Dax is meanwhile going towards Nigel with Nigel's back to him. And Dax realizes, oh shit, I'm too far close to Nigel for Nigel to properly move out of the way for me to then hit Cash. So he has to move out of the way for me to hit Cash. So what does he do? He goes and moves Nigel out of the way so that he can just hit his tag team partner. It's the stupid type of thing that it's like when you see somebody that they know that they're not supposed to get the pinfall, so they hold the other person's arm up and do something against themselves. Really, just if you're not paying attention, you wouldn't think anything of it. But I'm paying attention enough to it that I notice it, and I'm like, look at this spot. It's just that was the only thing that I had for the entire match that I wrote down. The match itself was perfectly fine, but not a standout thing, especially when you're watching two matches at the same matches at the same time, two cards at the same time. Definitely not the moment to go back and watch about all these pay-per-views. That's bigger, better stuff later on. That was followed up with the Channing Stacks, Lorenzo, and Tony D'Angelo match, which one of my takeaways for this was them calling attention to, man, it's really frustrating to have to refer to him as Channing Stacks Lorenzo a bunch of different times. So again, I'm one of those only people that's on the internet that bothers to actually do that. It seems most people are just sort of like, okay, well, I'm just going to call him Stacks. I'm a grammar person, so it is what it is. I was digging this match for the most part. Tony D was showing a lot of fire, a lot of anger and everything, as he should have, and a few moments where he was second guessing whether or not he was going to use a crowbar or something and really beat down on Stacks. Stacks had a moment where he was like, hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake or whatever. And then Tony D's like, no, you made your bed, and starts like kicking him and everything. The ending was weird though. So it ends with Luca Crucifino just popping up and just standing there and just staring. And Tony D is looking at him and he's saying something. It's inaudible, so I don't know. It's essentially like, what are you doing here? What's going on? Et cetera, et cetera. And in the process, chaining Stacks Lorenzo, low blows Tony D, and he's able to get the win through that. Now, even weirder, though, is what happens after the match, because the bell rings, Stacks is out of there, Tony D's in the ring, and Luca Crucifino goes to the ring and goes to try to give a hug to Tony D, who's like, what the hell, get away from me, and pushes him away. I don't really know what that's about. That's kind of strange, and I don't know if it's just very awkwardly done, or if they are going in a direction that I don't know where they're going. So I'm a little bit intrigued about that, but I'm leaning more towards it's probably just awkward. More than likely in pro wrestling, if something's just poorly done, looks weird, and or is like such a big, you know, it's out there, different angle, it's probably not the latter. Let's see if there's anything in this chat here. AEW is the best wrestling company today. That's where the best wrestle, apparently, right? Have you ever seen The Sopranos or The Wire on HBO Max? Not only have I never seen The Sopranos or The Wire, but I have also never seen either of them on HBO Max. I've never subscribed to HBO Max. Glad that it's HBO Max again, though, instead of Max. Some idiot thought that was a great idea, then, you know, whatever. So after that was a better match than even the Stacks and Tony D match, the stretcher match between Ricochet and Mark Briscoe. Ricochet beats Mark Briscoe. I don't have any notes really about this. They used the scissors. They had some moments where they all got bloodied up and everything, and it was just a good match. It's a fun match. Go ahead and check it out. You know, Ricochet wins. And I will say that they did the smart thing that we were talking about before that I was really hoping would be the case. This made so much logical sense. Stretcher match / ambulance match should basically be the way that they do these going forward. You can put your opponent on a stretcher and you put them in the ambulance, and that's how you win. That is exactly how this should go. And at this point, I don't want to see another stretcher match or ambulance match where that is not the setup. That should be the gold standard going forward. Points to AEW for that. The other notes about this, though, I mean, like, Ricochet wins. It makes sense. Mark Briscoe popped up again a little bit later on, so I was surprised about that. But good match. Then not as good. Again, like, we're kind of like upping the ante as we go along. Better match follows that even, and it's Stephanie Vaquer retaining her WWE Women's Championship from NXT over Jordynne Grace. I was a little bit surprised about that, although I will say I was less surprised after they had the AAA stuff. And I don't know if they announced anything that I missed. Maybe they said something about like the winner might have to defend at Worlds Collide, but I didn't see anything about that online, so maybe I didn't catch something. Oh, I forgot to mention that earlier on there was in the background of the Santana thing. Santana's talking to the No Quarter Couch crew, and in the background is Fallon Henley and JC Jane just arguing in the background. So little thing that's, you know, important. But Vaquer and Grace have a great match. Not at all surprising. They're both great. So they have a really great match. One of the best of the two cards in my point of view. I think that that's definitely one that you should go back and check out. And crowd was super into it and everything. Grace doesn't win the championship. And I'm a little bit curious. Maybe this factors in the Worlds Collide. Maybe it doesn't. Grace struck me as like now is the time for her to win the belt, because if not, I don't know where they go with Vaquer, and I don't know what they do with Grace. And there are people that can win that title off of Stephanie other than Jordynne Grace, but she just seemed to make the most sense to me. You know, Julia's gone, Roxanne's gone. Thankfully, they both should be on the main roster. I don't think Jada Parker should come back around to that. And then I look at the rest of the other roster, and I'm like, all right, well, there isn't anybody else that's like, now's the time for Lola Vice, for instance. I don't think she's ready for it. I think that even Lola Vice is not North American Championship ready. So to give her the world title for that, I think that would be a mistake. And then, you know, coming back around to it and whatever. So maybe this is just that, second time's the charm rule that keeps happening in WWE. That is 100% a thing. Like, we are well past the point of being able to say, once is happenstance, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, three times is enemy action. That's the quote from Goldfinger, I think. By the way, check out a Refutable Kill, the series on Fanboys Anonymous. Man, I miss doing that. The setup with that, though, most likely is that Jordynne Grace will probably win the championship at a future date, and they'll probably just have a rematch, and that'll be how they do it. But right now, maybe they wanted to wait. Maybe Vaquer is going to do something at Worlds Collide or something. I don't know. But we'll come back again to her a little bit later on. Very good match. Definitely one worth checking out. Let me double check the chat again. I see that Astro is saying some other stuff here on there. I think it's got Max, but to be clear about what to go first. Whether switching back to HBO Max, recommend checking out those shows. I've heard great things about them. I've always wanted to watch The Sopranos, and it's been one of those things that I didn't have HBO when they were running, and I don't have it. I'm not subscribed to it now either, but I didn't have that when they were running, so I didn't get a chance to see that when the show was on. And then I found out the finale, so I know what happens at the end, and I'm like, man, that kind of ruins that. And then at the same time, it's just such a long commitment, and there's so many other TV shows and movies that I'm backlogged on. So I don't want to start The Sopranos until I can binge it. And I almost did that during the lockdown pandemic, but I ended up instead binging some other things. Like, I binge watched the entirety of The Office, and I watched Back to the Future movies for the first time and stuff. So they're on the back burner. Heard great things about The Wire too. But apparently Tony Khan loves Sopranos, according to Conan. I don't necessarily see how that makes sense with storytelling. Sopranos is a lot more dialogue, characters, and story. Not as much action, right? Astro also says, I'm really tired of multi-person tag matches, especially matches for nothing. WWE has the Forced War Games, AEW has Anarchy in the Arena, Survivor Series, Stampede, etc., etc. Yeah. Back in the day, they used to do a lot of those, and that was like the special attraction was a tag team match, because you didn't really get a lot of that in the same way. But I think that there's good and there's bad for that. You're going to hear me come back around to this a little bit later on with the Money in the Bank predictions when we talk about the John Cena and Cody Rhodes tag match. That, to me, I get that like John Cena's tagging, and it's like these are big names. So you wouldn't necessarily do that on Monday Night Raw, but at the same time, it is just kind of killing time, and it sort of makes, Money in the Bank doesn't feel as big of a pay-per-view because it's got a tag team match. So you wouldn't do that at WrestleMania. You wouldn't do that at SummerSlam. Well, you got to do it at Money in the Bank, and you're going to downgrade it. It's definitely a hierarchy, though. WrestleMania type, SummerSlam type, and then you get to like Money in the Bank, and then you get to like the Backlash in Peru or whatever the hell. So anyway, Vaquer retains over Grace. Very good match. Go ahead and check that out. Hurt Syndicate then beats the Sons of Texas. Not at all surprising. Nothing for me to really talk about here. There was a botched suicide dive thing that happened toward the very end where Sammy Guevara was supposed to be stopped by Shelton, and either Sammy was a little bit too early or Shelton was a little bit too late. So that was pretty awkward. Not great. And nothing really happened in the match. So I don't really see what is supposed to be so great about this MJF and Hurt Syndicate angle. Nothing so far. This whole setup of like, will MJF get in there, was the same basic beat and the same joke over and over and over again for multiple weeks. And I hate when they do that. I hate when WWE does that, especially if it leads nowhere. I feel like this is just killing so much time. And I don't think that if we skip to the end that I'm going to be like, oh, this MJF story was totally worth it. I don't think that's going to be the case. Astra says, how much Law and Order SVU have you seen? Based off of the amount of clips that happened before Raw and before NXT and all that, God knows how many episodes I've seen the tail end of, and it's just like, I'm like cooking dinner or something, and I can overhear in the background the music, and I'm like, oh, I guess they got the killer, and it turned out that it was actually their aunt or somebody. My mom used to love Law and Order back in the day and used to have that on in the background a lot. So I've saw like many different, they have the same formula for a lot of things. She always liked really formulaic stuff. She always likes, like Lifetime movies and all. By the way, since I live in New York, I'm not that you could see it outside here, but not that far away from here, they were recording an episode one time of Law and Order, and everything was blocked off, and didn't see anybody on there. But you bump into people every once in a while. The next match after the tag title match, which one that was that the Oba Femi? No, okay, that was Kazuchika Okada, I think, retained over Speedball Mike Bailey for the Continental Championship. Maybe my match order is a little bit wrong there, because that was around the time I had to do a bunch of crap. But Okada over Bailey, I honestly didn't see almost anything of this match. I can't tell you if it was a good match or not. I was too busy doing way too many other things, and I was typing up stuff. I was trying to, keep everything nice and organized, and I'm, trying to take care of some other, stuff around the house and all that stuff. So I missed this match entirely. I cannot tell you anything about it. It's probably good because it's Okada and Bailey. Maybe they had an off night. I don't know. But Okada retains. Not at all surprised about that. He was, of course, going to retain. They're still not announcing, obviously, the All In Texas match, but I am 100% convinced Kenny Omega, Kazuchika Okada are going to end up having that international, intercontinental, continental, whatever you want to end up calling it. They're going to have that title unification. It's going to happen. So then it was Oba Femi retaining over Myles Borne. Myles Borne puts up a good fight. This was happening at the same time as the Speedball match. So again, I missed a good portion of it, unfortunately, because I was actually really interested to see what the dynamics would be here. But it did seem, based off of what I was able to watch, that they gave Borne quite a bit of offense. So I'm a little bit surprised about that. Now, of course, he comes up short. Again, call that coming from a mile away. But that's still a good showing. And we had said going into this, the whole purpose of this Myles Borne thing might be, a massive push in the future. It might be just to give him a little bit of a showcase. We don't know where they're going, but at the very least, we know that Femi's not going to lose, but Borne, by proxy of just getting the title match and by putting on a good show, will massively boost his stock. Because right now we're in a situation where Borne not beating Femi, but putting up a good fight, still has him as more valuable than pretty much anything that Eddie Thorpe had done to get his multiple title matches. There was never an option where I thought Thorpe was going to win that title. But now with Borne, if you were to tell me, say, maybe Ethan Page beats Ricky Saints on Tuesday, maybe he wins the North American Championship, immediately my brain is going, all right, the next possible champion after Ethan Page is either Javon Evans or it's Myles Borne. And that already speaks volumes. So good showing for Myles Borne from what I could see. Oba Femi retains. Seems like there's a little bit of damn, that kid really put up a fight against me kind of respect. Let me double check again the chat here. I see we got some more messages from Astro. Most shows don't need to be watched, only listened to. I only listen to most non-live things on 2x speed and get through a ton, yeah. Do you have any favorite actors? Do you read? I absolutely hate reading. It's funny because I'm a writer, but hate reading. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's I love reading my own stuff because I'm writing it. Actually, to be fair, I don't love reading my own stuff because I find flaws with it all the time. But, I like writing my own stuff, and I can do that over and over and over. I never run out of space to write. But when I'm reading somebody else's, I get so bored out of my brain, especially books. If I'd rather read a script than a book, which is funny enough. The way that my brain works, don't tell me, for instance, me sitting on my computer and be he sat at his computer willfully as the background was this and that, and then spend 2 paragraphs explaining the scenery around me. I find myself just being oh my God, can something happen? And then when it comes to a script or something, if I'm reading it, it's exterior park. I'm got it. Moving on. So I like writing in that fashion too. If anybody ever sees some of my works on some front, you'll see how I write like that. But not a fan of reading. It was also funny being such a grammar person that it's I don't like reading. Favorite actors? Lots of favorite actors. I usually don't watch a movie based off of just an actor though. Back in the day, Kevin Spacey was one of my favorites. Still think he's brilliant. Seems like a terrible person though, so that sucks. I'll have to do a whole deep dive of like fanboy stuff at some point. But yeah, then we had a backstage segment after the Femi match, and that was Stephanie Vaquer having an argument with, again, Dallas, I'm assuming is her name, and Chick Tormenta. And then JC Jane comes up out of nowhere and she goes, "Hey Stephanie," and then just whap, just wallops her in the face with a slap. I think that they had said something about maybe like Vaquer is defending the championship on Tuesday. Maybe not. Maybe I heard that wrong. I don't know, but I'm assuming it's against JC Jane if that's the case. So that's something to look forward to. I don't remember them having a graphic up on the screen though. And if you want to see two girls go at it, well, then the next thing was Toni Storm against Mina Shirakawa. And I mean the innuendo in both the match itself and also what happened after the match, because Timeless Toni Storm retains as expected. And then the finale of the whole thing is that the two of them make out for a second. So a lot of people got what they wanted out of that match. And, maybe that's the big highlight of the night for a lot of them. The match itself, I was paying more attention to the other stuff that was happening in NXT, so I didn't really watch it all that much. Astro, if you did not see House of Cards, watch all of it, but when you get to the last season, don't bother. Once they take Kevin Spacey out of the show, don't bother with the show. It's not good. The other setup of the whole thing, though, House of Cards, amazing show. What do we go from there? It was Mina Shirakawa, and then that's when they started both the Anarchy in the Arena match and the final match for the Battleground cards. So that was Joe Hendry defending the TNA World Championship against Trick Williams, and it was hard to pay attention to both at the same time. Anarchy in the Arena goes far longer than the other match, so match segment wise, Joe Hendry loses the TNA World title, and now we're back to the segment that we had done before, previewing all this, of where I believe it was Rob had suggested this, and I'm like, all right, Rob, I totally agree with you now. That Hendry would lose here, and then most likely at the next TNA proper pay-per-view, because they do have one more monthly special in the meantime. They're going to do, I think it's Against All Odds on June something or other, but at like the beginning of July they're going to have Slammiversary, so it makes sense at this point that it ends up being like, all right, Trick Williams is the new champion. He wins by like shenanigans a little bit. There's the title belts in the ring and he's able to slam Joe Hendry on that, and then it's kind of like, well, the referee didn't disqualify him because it was just there, but that's a means to take the belt off Joe Hendry, put Trick Williams in that spot, give him some time over in TNA, gives him a little bit of a reboot too in some ways, because he can be a champion for a whole new roster, so he gets another world title reign, but he doesn't have to offset the Femi stuff. And I don't know when they're going to do with the draft. Of course, I don't know any backstage information anyway, but we keep talking about the idea that the draft might not happen in WWE. The way that they're waiting so long, I think that there might not be one. I think there just might be another like, well, you can swap people back and forth at any time type of thing. But if they do a draft, they've got a lot of these events coming up that are still like, they got to get Money in the Bank out of the way, and they got to get Worlds Collide out of the way. Well, they don't have to, but you know what I mean. They've got all these like Night of Champions, and now that they announced the Evolution and Saturday Night's Main Event stuff, which probably at this point that's going to be where Goldberg's match is because it's Atlanta, Georgia. The like rapid fire pay-per-views that they're doing doesn't really allow a lot of room for the draft. Keeping that in mind, if you don't want to call somebody up and you want to keep them in NXT, or you want to keep them around not on the main roster because you don't have something for them to do, but you need to kill time, there are lots of different ways for you to do that. And I hate when WWE does that by just keeping somebody in NXT and they just do nothing, or they just disappear. This could be a good means to avoid that, because if Trick is on TNA more than he's on NXT over the next month and a half, then he's not doing anything. He's the world champion of another promotion. And they can show clips. They can have him pop up on NXT and do something with the people that he's feuding with. Maybe he has a match with Mike Santana at Against All Odds, for instance. And then maybe that's like Santana and Trick have some kind of a segment on NXT and whatever. But he effectively becomes a secondary world champion to get a lot of the focal point if you even want him there. And that's not going to mean he loses momentum. So I think at this point, Trick loses that belt back to Joe Hendry, and he loses that at a Slammiversary most likely. And then at that point, it's the July something or other time frame. That's enough time that they can move some other people around the rosters and then maybe have something for Trick to do. Maybe he reteams with Carmelo. Maybe Carmelo already loses his tag team with Miz or something in the meantime. Maybe they still just have something else in mind for Trick. I don't know. But I think that the setup of like Trick going off and doing something else is actually going to be really beneficial for his career. So maybe I'm wrong in the future. We look back and ends up being not the case, but I think that that's going to be a very strong key. Let me double check the chat a little bit more. Let's see what we got. Who are the next NXT call-ups? We'll talk about that a little bit in the future, actually. Tony got distracted during Tony Storm versus Mina Shirakawa match for the wrong reasons. So, as you got the upper hand on the go home NXT, I figured he was losing on the title of Trick. Yep, they won the tag match at Under Siege, so that makes sense. Don't any of your contributors from the past be willing to do videos on Fanboys Anonymous All Talk Show if they don't follow wrestling as much? Yeah, I just don't get an opportunity to do the Fanboys and All Talk Show stuff. If I were to... I'm sure if I were to like send out a message and be like, hey, who wants to do the All Talk Show? I'm going to do another episode. I'm sure I could get like Wago. I'm sure I could get Drew and Peyton and probably Kaylin. I don't know. Kaylin's schedule's a little different. But yeah, I want to do more All Talk shows. I wish that I had the time. The Trick Williams thing though, not at all surprising when you really think about it. But then again, I was going into this thinking that the title was just going to stay put. So I was wrong about that. Or as Michael P.S. Hayes would say, I was wrong. Anarchy in the Arena. Now, this is a match that it's so much easier for me to just say, just go watch it. Like, this is one of the best matches of the year. This is a lot of fun. It's a bunch of people beating the crap out of each other. If that's not your game, you want to see more technical wrestling, then maybe you don't want to watch it or whatever, but this is a match of the year candidate for me. It's not, there's not a single spot in this that makes me go, okay, that's the best spot of the year. But in typical fashion, when we come around to the end of the year awards, I end up saying probably everything that happened in the Anarchy in the Arena match is like at least in the running for best spot for the year for WWE or for AEW. They did a lot of the stuff, you know. I mean, Willow Nightingale has her ears clamped to the ring post with like a, God, what's the word? Lock, you know, like a safety lock. Couldn't think of the word for some reason. There's the staple gun is brought out. Moxley, I think, gets one in the neck. Swerve gets one on his tongue. People bleeding all over the place. You know, the setup with like they constantly do the thing with the music for this. It's like it's a gimmick now at this point. It's always going to happen. I guess they decided to play a little bit of jokes on that. So they had something playing. Then Kenny Omega says, you know, like, switch it up. And it's I'm so excited. And then they switch it up again, and it's Let the Bodies Hit the Floor. I think that's the name of the song. Maybe it's just Bodies or something. But, you know, if I say that, you know what it is. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. That song. It was ECW's theme, I think, or something. They do that over and over and over again until Claudio swings. Who was it? Was it Swerve? I don't remember. Claudio swings somebody into the speaker. So that was a good way for it to like end. And, you know, I was kind of tired of that song at this point. So funny little gimmicky thing there. I'll give them credits for that. Fun match. Lots of people beating each other up. And we got some interference stuff. Hook had a thing where he helped out a little bit. And then they had a little bit of tension between him and Smojo because he decided to just leave. And then Gabe Kidd, I always want to call him Gabe Kidd. Gabe Kidd came out. He started getting involved, costs Smojo from getting like a submission victory. And Mark Briscoe then comes out. And I don't know where Briscoe is factoring in here for this. Maybe he was just like, well, I haven't gotten beaten up enough today. I'm going to do that. But maybe this is like switching up the dynamic a little bit for Blood and Guts. Maybe it's setting up something for New Japan where it's like Gabe Kidd against Mark Briscoe in, Dominion or something. But yeah, hell of a match. Very interested to see where they come, like how they can top this. A couple other notes about the match itself, just like funny little bits and stuff. Swerve Strickland came out as the Predator. Pretty cool. Young Bucks came out as the Founding Fathers. Not as cool. But, it was what it was. And Kenny Omega had like a Captain America kind of vibe going on. He had a trash can lid that was supposed to be like the Captain America shield, but like with other patterns, because they obviously, for copyright reasons, can't do the same thing. But not as cool of an outfit as the Predator one. I'll give Swerve the win on that front. Then at this point, NXT's over with, and I'm like, all right, well, we still have 2 matches left on AEW, and I'm like, man, I kind of want this pay-per-view to end. They didn't sell me on not changing my mind about that with the Paragon match against the Don Callis family. I wasn't paying enough attention to this match to tell you much about it because I was just not interested in watching it, and they didn't draw my attention. Even though I had less to pay attention to, they couldn't draw my attention. Paragon loses, and after the match, Lance Archer, Trent Beretta, and Rocky Romero start attacking them even more. And then we get the whole making the save moment with Brody King, Tomohiro Ishii, and Hiroshi Tanahashi. So we're already setting up for Forbidden Door. I don't know if that's the setup that I would go with, of like Paragon and Tanahashi and Ishii and Brody King against them. But I guess it's just going to be 2 separate matches, maybe. Maybe it's going to be like TNT titles defended, or is that, I don't know. But yeah, that was kind of a nothing segment to me on a lot of fronts. And then we had another match of the year candidate, Will Ospreay opposing Hangman Adam Page, and they're fighting for the Owen Hart Cup again. Winner goes on to go and have a title match at All In Texas against Jon Moxley, unless Jon Moxley loses the title in the meantime, but he's not going to. And hell of a match. Another match of the year candidate, as I said. Definitely go back and check that out. I don't know which one I like better between that and Anarchy in the Arena. I think at this point, after watching Anarchy in the Arena, the fun element of it and like what's going to happen next depletes it a little bit. So more than likely, this is the better match and the one that you could probably like rewatch and be like, okay, I'll appreciate it a little bit more. But I do think that if you were going to show somebody that wasn't a super big pro wrestling fan, you'd probably show them Anarchy in the Arena and just be like, look at this, it's people beating each other up. So great match. Paige wins, and I'm a little bit surprised about that. And then I was thinking, well, it's Texas, so maybe it's as simple as that. Maybe Tony Khan was just like, it makes sense to put Paige in the big match in Texas. He'll get a big pop. Ospreay, I was not thinking would have won the title anyway. I'm still thinking that Moxley retains over Hangman, and they probably do some kind of like a death match or something. So that could be fun. But the Paige win was not what I was going. I was thinking that Ospreay was going to win. So a little bit surprised about that. And I, again, would recommend you go back and check that out. I would say if you wanted to go like kind of hacksaw this, not Jim Duggan, but like, kind of piecemeal which ones you want to really watch, I would say go back and watch the Stephanie Vaquer Jordynne Grace match. And by the way, they did a little segment too. Ricky Saints had came out of the ring to again plug the whole North American Championship thing and then say that they were going to do something at Worlds Collide. So watch Vaquer and Grace. Maybe watch Borne and Femi. I can't quite call attention to that. Go back and check out the stretcher match. Check out the Anarchy in the Arena. Check out Ospreay and Paige. And probably go back and check out the Moné and Hayter match. Maybe that's like the ones you really should go back and rewatch if you missed these. But I thought that overall the two pay-per-views were pretty decent. And I wish I could have been watching them one at a time. I think I would have appreciated them even more if that was the case. So that's the breakdown of both of these. And I wouldn't let me know what you think about doing this like back and forth thing. If we get other pay-per-views in the future, like the Saturday Night's Main Event thing, should I just do Saturday Night's Main Event, end the podcast, start a new podcast, do the AEW one? Or should I just do the combo thing? Should I go back and forth, segment by segment? What do you prefer and all that? Also, let me know what you think by joining the Discord server, as I mentioned before, and also show your support on all the different ways that you can. There are a lot of different ways for you to do that. The super chats right now going on. The live chat element is kind of an equivalent of the thanks button. So if you're listening after the fact, then the thanks button is another opportunity for you to like toss a little spare change our way. Click on the join button though, and that one gives you access to a bunch of different tiers. Now these tiers are $1 and up, and if you are on the $1 tier, awesome, love it. If you're on the $5 tier, I love it even more, and that will give you access to early content if we record stuff in advance. We did that before. If you want to check out like the Mount Rushmore, for instance, that was like I posted it like 2 days earlier. It's also kind of an ad block forgiveness thing. Darkcast tier, those are episodes you can only listen to if you are on at least the Darkcast tier and forward. And we're going to carry that on again and finish out our Mount Rushmore with the next Darkcast we do, probably sometime in this next week or so. We got Pick Your Poison tier after that. That is when, if you want me to do something in particular about Smark Out Moment or Fanboys Anonymous, and you're like, I really want you to do this movie rewatch, or I want you to do a top rope list of something, or Mount Rushmore of your favorite Spider-Man villains, or, whatever it might be. That's how you get to request it and like make sure that I do that episode. Patreon, same thing, patreon.com/SmarkOutMoment. Oh, the same tiers are same over on the YouTube channel as well. And Redbubble and TeePublic is where you can pick up your merchandise if you're interested in that. And also keep in mind that if you want to just follow all the different accounts that you can find for Smark Out Moment, Fanboys Anonymous, and all my own personal things, you can find a link tree list to all that on either anthonymango.com or amangotree.com. They're exactly the same. They'll just bring you to a different, redirect link and all. So follow those accounts on Letterboxd, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever it might be. And keep in mind that we're just going to roll along here. More and more podcasts to come your way because wrestling does not stop. So the game plan for this week is we're most likely going to be watching back one of the old Money in the Bank pay-per-views. Or not the full pay-per-view, I shouldn't specify that. The ladder match. I believe we're going to do 2015 and then carry on the Darkcast of 2005 rewatch. We've rewatched 2005 before. There's a previous fan announce table for it. So if we don't get around to it or we think of another Darkcast, then that's perfectly fine for us. But Robin Callum didn't rewatch that with me. That was a different, I forget, it was like Kaylin and Angie or somebody. Still a fun podcast, I'm sure. So go back and check it out. But we might do like round 2 of me doing that. And yeah, it's been God knows how many years since I watched that match. So those are kind of the next things we got coming your way. We are going to potentially talk about some, pay-per-view stuff when we get around to that a little bit, because we do have so many more pay-per-views coming around. So maybe we do the Darkcast of the Mount Rushmore this week too. Maybe we don't. If you have any other ideas about what you want us to do, always drop them in the comments below. Always drop them on the Discord. I always keep that stuff in mind, because if you guys request something enough, then I'll try to move some stuff out of the way. We don't have to do a fan announce table of a previous Money in the Bank ladder match. If you want us to do something else, we'll play around with it. Keep that in mind though. Make sure you are subscribed. Keep checking smarkoutmoment.com, and we'll see you back around with the next main event, next hot tags, and so on and so forth. Don't know what it'll be right now. You got to stay tuned. And that's going to do us in for this episode. So thank you for listening. Thank you for leaving your comments, for all your support, and I'll see you next time. But for now, this has been another Smark Out Moment, and I'm being counted out.